What if Bigfoot ruled the world and everything we know about power, cities and history was turned inside out? Imagine closing your eyes and waking in a night forest, where the skyline is not concrete but treetops, where roads are not asphalt but animal paths pressed into moss, where the deep voice of the planet speaks through bark and wind. In that world, we are not the storytellers. We are the story. We are the rumour that parents whisper to calm or to warn. Do not wander from the trail. The thin ones light small fires. We think of ourselves as the inevitable end of evolution. But Earth is old beyond comfort. Our chapter is a late footnote. What if a different intelligence rose first in the cold breath of conifers? Not a species of metal and glass, a species of muscle and memory, a species that learned to hear distances through wood, a species tall enough to part fog with its shoulders, a species that never needed to pave the forest to call it home. At first the idea feels ridiculous, a bedtime myth with oversized footprints and shaky photographs. But stay a moment, ask a quieter question. What if the myth survived because it carried a shape of truth? Not the creature we chase in tabloids, the civilization we never learned to see. No neon, no billboards, no towers against the moon, only vaulted canopies that open and close with the seasons, only bridges grown from roots, only halls woven from branches that drink sunlight and return it as shade. We think proof must shine like steel. We think evidence must clatter when dropped. Yet the forest keeps its own records, trails that hold memory the way vinyl holds sound, knots that mark agreements, scars on bark that preserve lore, a code of knocks that crosses valleys at dusk, a map written in scent and lichen that does not yellow with age because it is always alive. If Bigfoot had ruled, would we have noticed at all? We search for ruins in deserts and forget to search for design in living things. We measure time by crumbling stone. They would measure it by sap rising and falling. We keep history in shelves that burn. They would keep it in waters that return each year and in salmon that thread the same silver path through memory. We count progress in height. They would count it in quiet. What would power look like in their hands? Not a throne. Perhaps a circle at the foot of a tree older than any crown. Justice as labour returned to the common path. War not as conquest, but as a failure to listen to the drum in the wood. Wealth as abundance of shade in hot months. Status as the number of bridges you coaxed from living roots and left behind for strangers. And us. Where would we stand? In the margins, in the clearings, flickering at the edges of their hearing. We would become the puzzle that they tell their young before sleep. The sharp-eyed creatures who steal heat from sticks. The restless tribe that moves toward open ground because we fear the dark choir of the trees. They would wonder whether we think at night with the same patience they do. Whether our quick hands mean quick wisdom or only quick hunger. The impossible question will not leave. If Bigfoot ruled the world, would our cities be called scars? Would our silence be a sign of respect rather than surrender? Would we learn that a roof can be grown instead of nailed? Would we finally understand that a path is not something you take from a forest? It is something you return to it. Listen. The wind across the canopy sounds almost like a voice. Perhaps it is only air. Perhaps it is a memory of a council long finished. Perhaps it is the future speaking from a world that chose a different listener. What if the measure of a civilization is not how far it reaches beyond the earth? What if it is how gently it lives within it? Imagine the world taking a different breath. The cold lingers a little longer. Winters bite deeper, and the summers are short and blue with shade. The forests pull tighter around the shoulders of continents. In that climate, a certain shape thrives. Broad-chested, long-limbed, wrapped in a coat that keeps the night from gnawing. What if in that cradle of conifers, an intelligence awakened that did not need to tame the forest because it already belonged to it? Picture a valley at dusk. Mist rests between trunks like a low tide of cloud. You hear a sound you cannot place at first. Not speech, not song. A deep knock that rolls through wood and soil. One reply, then two. Across the ridge a pattern forms. What if language began not with mouths but with trees, meaning as vibration, grammar as rhythm, a poem you can feel in your ribs before you know it in your head? Food is a school teacher. In these woods the lessons are patience and memory. Berries ripen in pockets of sun. Tubers lie along old floodlines. Salmon return in silver ropes if you remember the timing of the rain. What if intelligence grew as a map of taste and season? Minds that could hold the forest like a cathedral plans its arches. Minds that could pass that plan without a script because the script is the trail itself. Scale matters. A taller body reaches where the fog stays sweet. Longer strides make the land feel a little smaller. Hands that can peel bark in broad sheets can also braid roots into bridges given enough seasons. What if technology began as persuasion rather than force, not cut and nail, coax and wait? The first tools are not prisons for trees, they are invitations. A branch leans, a root curves, a shelter grows. In a world like this, speed is not victory. Endurance is. You do not sprint through centuries, you pace them. Their minds would favour the long thought, the thought that can sit under weather, the thought that knows which truth can be carried by a child and which must be carried by a grove. What if wisdom is nothing more than the ability to match your decisions to the tempo of the living things around you? Now place us in this story. We are there on the edges, quick and curious. Good at sparks, good at throwing our voice across a valley with smoke and fire. We move toward open ground because we see far and we like to see farther. What if our gifts turned us into ghosts in their legends? The thin ones, the bright ones, the ones who do not stay once they have taken what they need. Return to the valley. The knocks have stopped. The mist has thickened. You sense a presence without seeing it. A family group passing like a weather front. No hurry, no fear. Their steps avoid young shoots without looking down. Their shoulders part the fog as if opening a curtain. What if this is what dominance looks like when it has no interest in being seen? Not banners, not walls, only the confidence of knowing every sound the forest can make and which of them do not belong. Climate sets the stage, bodies write the first lines, culture writes the rest. In this alternate chapter, the script is gentle but firm. Children learn the names of winds before they learn the names of stars. Elders mark disputes in the bark of a single old tree because the tree remembers longer than any judge. Messages travel through wood and water. News arrives as a pattern of echoes that carry across miles of trunks. What if the world itself is the archive and the library and the court? The hinge of history is small. A few more centuries of cold, a few more belts of green, a few fewer fires on open plains. The balance shifts. Our late arrival does not vanish. It simply does not take the crown. The crown belongs to the canopy and to those who can speak with it. And somewhere in that quiet, a different story of civilization begins to root and climb, leaf by leaf, ring by ring, age by age, until one day it is the only story the forest needs to tell. What if language did not begin with mouths at all? What if it began with distance and with patient wood? Imagine a forest that is a cathedral of instruments, every trunk a drum, every fallen log a low bell, every hollow a chamber that keeps a note alive just long enough for another to catch it. In that place, words are not shapes on paper. They are pulses moving through matter. You do not read them with your eyes. You feel them with your ribs. Listen to the first conversation at twilight. A single knock from a ridge. Not loud, not urgent. It rolls through the line of spruce and cedar like thunder remembering how to be a heartbeat. A reply comes from the valley. 2 knocks close together, then a pause long enough to measure the space between families. Patterns emerge the way constellations do. Not because the stars move, but because the mind learns to see the intervals as meaning. What if grammar is simply the choreography of waiting? The distance between sounds. The patience to let an echo finish its long work. Sound is only one river. Scent is another. Think of a trail as a sentence that lasts for days. A weave of resin and crushed leaf and the salt of skin. Markers set where stories change direction. Markers removed when a promise is kept. An oath can be a pattern of odour left beneath a certain kind of bark. A warning can be a sharp citrus note braided with smoke at a fork in the path. What if the most intimate library is not a room at all, but a corridor of living air? You step into it and the past stands up to greet you. There is a third channel, light written into lichen and moss, the patient script of textures, grooves grown into bark where fingers have returned year after year to repeat a memory until it learns to live on its own. A spiral tells of a salmon run that failed and what the elders did to give the river back its voice. A ladder of small cuts records a dispute that ended with restitution rather than revenge. None of it is permanent in the way our monuments pretend to be. All of it is continuous in the way our memories wish they were. What if permanence is a misunderstanding and continuity is the real miracle? Imagine being born into this. Your first lesson is not the alphabet. Your first lesson is resonance. A caretaker places your small palm on a trunk while a cousin 2 hills away sends 3 soft knocks. You feel the tree answer before you hear it. You learn that meaning is not a spark that jumps, it is a tide that arrives. Later you are led along a memory trail and asked to stand still where a faint braid of smoke hangs beneath wet leaves. You breathe until the thread becomes a word in your mind, and the word becomes a picture, and the picture becomes a duty. The forest is teacher vocabulary and classroom all at once. Intelligence grows to match its instruments. Minds shaped by low tones will notice patience and weight. Minds trained on scent will feel causation as a gradient that thickens or thins. Minds that read texture will think with their hands and will trust evidence that resists the rain. Calculation happens in the body as much as in the head. Decisions are rehearsed by walking a path and listening for which bend echoes right. What if thought is not a private monologue but a duet with place? We tend to imagine that complex ideas require writing that survives centuries. They do in our world because our world is often at war with weather. In this other world, the archive does not outlast storms, it participates in them. A treaty can be a garden planted along a creek where 2 territories touch. The proof of the agreement is the health of the soil. If the plants thrive, the promise is kept. If they brown, the promise has been broken. Enforcement is not a punishment handed down. It is a season of shared labour to restore what has failed. The record is not a ledger but a landscape. Now hear a counsel. Not a circle of stone but a circle of breath beneath a tree that has watched more winters than any living elder. One group arrives from the upland shadows with a scent pattern heavy in resin that means hunger ahead. Another comes from the riverline carrying the light salt of fish. They exchange knocks to count their number and the number missing. They sit with their backs against the same trunk so that the wood can take their voices and return them softened. Stories travel around the circle as frequencies more than as volume. The youngest speak last because they deserve a version of the truth that has had time to become kind. What if justice is not an argument that ends in victory but a conversation that ends in quiet? Where do we fit inside a language like this? We are quick with fire and symbols, and we love to leap across distances our throats can reach. We look at the knocks and we hear only noise. We look at the trails and smell only damp leaf. We look at lichen scars and see only age. Perhaps every time we came close and then left, laughing at the stillness we missed a library that was speaking in a slower voice. Perhaps the stories we told about monsters were only the echoes of a vocabulary we never learned to read. Picture a child at the edge of a sasquatch settlement, not a city. That word is wrong here. A weave of shade that breathes. The child has followed a pattern of taps without meaning to. They stand beneath a canopy that orders the sky into squares of gentle light. There is no gate to pass through. There is only a shift in the way the wind explains itself. A tall figure steps into view and does not roar. It leans a shoulder against a tree and waits for the echo of the child's fear to fade. Then it places a palm on the trunk and sends a single knock that means welcome without promise. The child hears it twice. Once in the ear, once in the bones. This is how diplomacy might begin when 2 languages share no words but share the same planet. Consider the scale of memory in bodies that live long and travel slow. A song can last a season if the chorus is a route between berries and roots and water. A lesson can last a lifetime if it is tied to a migration that will return each year. Failure leaves marks you can touch. Success leaves shade you can rest under. What if the very idea of truth becomes something you can walk through? And the very idea of lie becomes something that refuses to grow. At the edge of evening, the conversation of the forest gathers itself. Distant knocks line up like stars learning a new constellation. The scent along the main trail deepens and then dissolves as rain approaches. Small hands trace old stories in soft moss and feel new growth pushing up through every mark. Language is not an artifact here. It is a climate. It surrounds. It nourishes. It sets limits, it forgives, and in that climate a civilization can think in a way that leaves almost nothing behind and still loses nothing at all. What if a city could breathe, not as a metaphor but as a daily act? Roofs that open at dawn to taste the cool and close before storms arrive. Walls that sip light and give it back as shade. Streets that are not scars but soft curves of moss where feet learn a slower stride. Imagine an architecture that grows rather than conquers. You do not break the forest to house a people. You speak to it until it agrees to make room. Begin with a single sapling guided by patient hands. A young trunk is invited to lean over a stream. Branches are trained with woven cords of vine and the gentle weight of stones. Season after season, the wood remembers the guidance. It thickens along the curve and accepts its new task. A bridge does not appear in a week, it ripens. The first crossings are careful. Later, the arch is so sure of itself that even a loaded family can pass without a creak. The lesson repeats in every district. Platforms are coaxed where trunks meet. A lattice of roots becomes a walkway suspended in green air. A children hall is a ring of living pillars that widen a breath more each year. Buildings do not have dates of completion. They have birthdays. Inside these spaces, the materials are the weather made quiet. Bark becomes shingles that breathe. Packed leaf and clay become cool beds for summer. Ribs of hardwood carry the weight of heavy rain without complaint because the load is shared with 1,000 leaves. Openings face the paths of prevailing wind. Light wells are trimmed in pale lichen that softens noon into kindness. There is no glass. Water and oil on stretched skin are enough to make a window that holds warmth at night and can be folded away before dawn. Every structure is tuned like an instrument, because sound is part of speech and law. A council hall can carry a whisper from one side to the other without raising a voice. Hollows along the main beams act as low drums for announcements. A short rapid pattern means a meeting at the old cedar when the sun reaches mid-shadow. A long slow pattern means a guest approaches from the river. A roof that has learned the voice of its people can quiet the noise of a storm into a single calm note so that stories can continue through the worst weather. Fire exists here but is used with care. Much of life prefers heat that lies under the skin of the earth. Kitchens are pits lined with stone that hold embers for days. Smoke is drawn through climbing vines that clean it before it meets the open air. On clear nights, the community cooks beneath a canopy that traps warmth and then parts like a curtain so that stars can finish the meal. Light at night is a partnership with small living things. Fungi that glow softly are seeded along paths. In the council ring, a bowl of river invertebrates gives a silver pulse. The darkness is never driven out. It is invited to sit at a respectful distance. Water is the other great architect. Gutters not metal. They are vines trained to carry rain to cistern ponds. These ponds are lined with clay and the roots of plants that drink impurities and return clear flow. Waste is not a problem to hide. It is a responsibility to feed. The city composts itself in tiers that smell of fruit and soil. Nothing sharp, nothing hurried. The health of the architecture is measured by the clarity of the stream below it. If fish return in thick bodies, the work is good. If they thin, the city has spoken badly and must listen. Boundaries are soft. There is no straight line that says inside and outside. There are gradients of care. Near the heart of a settlement, the understory is trimmed to open sightlines for children and elders. Farther out, the forest is left wild so that the city can remember where it comes from. Between these zones are gardens that look like accidents. They are not. They are treaties with pollinators, flowers that open in shifts to keep bees fed from first thaw to last frost. Berry shrubs groomed to leave enough for bears and birds. A plan that works only if the architects believe they are not alone. In a place like this, work and art are the same motion. A repair is also a design choice that becomes a style. A needed shelter is also a chance to teach patience. Apprentices do not sketch on bark before they touch a branch. They walk. They stand in wind and learn its preferences. They listen to the creak until they can say where it will swell and where it will concede. Then they begin. It is common to start a structure for a grandchild you will never meet. The gift is the point. The credit dissolves with the first rain. We search for monuments when we try to measure a civilization. Stone cut to knife edges. Towers that catch the eye from a day away. Here the monuments are seasons. A street that grows one shade darker each summer. A bridge that learns a new song as its arch thickens. A plaza of roots that remembers the steps of 1,000 dances and keeps their rhythm ready for the next gathering. If you ask where the centre is, you will be shown a tree that refuses to do anything except survive. Around it, the city offers what skill it has: drainage, mulch, shelter from lightning. Respect is the foundation stone that never moves. There is a question that blooms when you stand in such a place. What if we have been wrong about comfort? We spent centuries trying to keep weather out. They spent centuries learning to speak to it. Their rooms are warm because a roof knows how to hold the day a little longer. Their corridors are cool because shade understands its craft. Their nights are quiet not because sound is forbidden, but because every structure sings at the pitch of rest. Picture dawn, mist lifting in slow threads, bridges wet with dew. A few figures move along the high walks with the balance of those who are born to them. Somewhere a council hall sends a gentle pattern that means good morning and safe travel. The city breathes in, it breathes out. It does what no stone skyline can ever do. It grows a future out of the very world it depends on, and leaves that future rooted enough to stand without noise. What if energy did not arrive in sparks but in breaths? Imagine a world where power is gathered the way water gathers in a hollow after rain, quietly, patiently, without bruising the place that gives it. Begin with the river, not a dam that arrests a valley, a row of small wheels set in side channels that the fish ignore and the reeds accept. Every wheel turns as the current persuades it. The motion is stored in braided cords that twist and hold tension like patient muscles. Families come to win their tools from this reservoir of gentle force. A mill for grinding seeds, a press for squeezing oil from nuts, a loom that moves as if it remembers a song. Wind lives in the canopy. It does not need towers. It needs the right conversation with leaves. Along high walks there are veins made from skin that has learned to drink the sky. They bend and spring back and leave their strength in a bundle of fibers that tightens a little more with each gust. The energy is not delivered all at once. It accumulates like a promise kept over days. When the weather turns, the stored strength unwinds into useful work and then rests. Heat comes from earth, not fire. Shallow pits are lined with stone and clay, and a set of channels that invite warm air to rise and cool air to be patient. In winter, a bed breathes softly and holds sleep at a kind temperature. In summer, the same bed exhales the day into the ground and becomes a pool of night. Cooking respects this cycle. Pits keep embers that refuse to flare. Meat steams beside roots that become sweet only when they are allowed to change slowly. Light is less a command and more a partnership. Paths gleam with the soft breath of fungi that wake when dusk begins. Jars of water seeded with small glowing lives sit along the main circle. They are tended like gardens. When a storm tears leaves and limits the sky, the community does not rage against the dark. It speaks to it in a lower voice and waits. The night replies with enough light to share a meal and a story. Materials are technologies that remember the places they came from. Resin becomes an adhesive that holds strong against wet and yet lets go when heat is kind. Sinew joins beams in a way that can flex without breaking. Basalt accepts an edge that will not betray you when you carve through green wood. Bone carries the weight of a basket without protest because bone has carried weight before. Nothing is asked to be something it is not for long. Storage is the art that separates a hungry season from a confident one. Energy is stored in twisted cords and in bent poles that want to spring back and will gladly do so when asked. Food is stored in earth that stays cool without shouting. Shelters are built with layers that admit air into spaces where spoilage cannot take hold. Knowledge is stored as patterns in smell and rhythm and as practice that keeps hands honest. A tool that sits too long will be handed to a child who will learn its temper through work. The child becomes the battery. The task becomes the charge. Signals cross distance without wire. A line of hollows carved into a frame can send a pattern like a tide moving along a beach. Low sounds carry between trunks and respect birds in sleep. Scent pillars along trails tell travellers what has changed since last season without summoning anyone to speak. At night light is language too. A bowl glows brighter when a message is urgent. A series of dim points across a ridge tells a story that can wait until morning. The network is alive and so it heals itself when a storm silences one path. Another path grows. There is mathematics here and it is written in patience. You can count by the stretch of a fibre. You can measure by how long a wheel takes to wet and dry. You can predict by listening to the way a branch talks when clouds roll over it. Accuracy does not demand instruments of glass and metal. It demands attention returned every day until attention becomes skill and skill becomes culture. What would innovation look like in such a world? Not disruption. Discovery followed by adoption that does not break what works. A new hinge is tested through a season of wind. A new cord waits through rain and cold. Only when it survives is it taught beyond the family that imagined it. Credit is spoken once in a circle, and then is folded away. Everyone knows who listened first. The forest knows as well. That is enough. We think of technology as a ladder that climbs away from nature. Here it is a lattice that grows inside it. Tools are agreements. Energy is a rhythm. Waste is a teacher that corrects gently because it never leaves. When a stream turns cloudy, the entire settlement feels the failure in the taste of morning. When a path grows bare, the drums change their pattern to call for repair instead of celebration. Accountability is not a punishment. It is a return to the work that keeps life possible. Imagine the sound of a day that runs on these engines, water whispering as wheels turn out of sight, fibres creaking like contented animals as tension is stored, a low thrum under the floorboards as heat moves from one room to another. No roar, no shriek. The loudest thing is laughter when a jar of soft light is carried to a story circle and set between strangers. Progress is not invisible. It can be felt in how easily the old wake and the young sleep. What if the measure of a good invention is not how fast it makes a task, but how kindly it asks the world to help? What if power is strongest when it is almost silent? What if the future has always been around us, waiting for us to match its tempo? In a world ruled by those who learned the language of trees, first the answer is not a blueprint. The answer is a season that arrives on time and a harvest that leaves the river clearer than it was. What if wealth were not something you could hold in a hand, but something that followed behind you, like a quiet path you had cared for? Imagine an economy that begins with a promise and ends with a memory. There is no coin. There is no note to pass. There is only the record of what you tended and who felt safer because you were there. A trail repaired after hard rain is worth a basket of roots, because the basket arrives only if the trail leads you home. A bridge that does not fail is worth a dozen jars of oil, because the jars can meet families that would otherwise remain strangers. The value is not carved onto a symbol. It is carved into the day. Trade happens where paths soften into a clearing that knows how to hold listening. People approach slowly so the drums can count numbers and intentions. There is a rhythm for hunger. There is a rhythm for surplus. There is a rhythm that means sit and breathe first. Baskets open, not to display price, to display care. Dry berries that were turned during storms. Fish smoked over clean fires so that no bitter note remains. Roots lifted without tearing the earth. Work is visible in the object. Work draws its own gravity. Reputation is the first currency. It is stored not in chests but in other minds. A family that has maintained the high crossing for 3 seasons finds that their baskets travel farther without question. They do not need to ask for more. More arrives, and it is not charity. It is balance. Their name is attached to a stretch of path that belongs to everyone. Their credit grows each time someone places a foot there and feels no fear. There are ledgers. They do not live on bark or stone. They live in acts that return. When a group falls into scarcity, they light a scent signal that others recognize as an old debt coming due. The signal says, "We sang for your dead." We walked the long way when flood took your bridge. We kept silence when your child slept. The answer arrives along 3 trails: meat, root, labour. The debt is settled not by counting items, but by calming weather in a life that has turned rough. The proof is the next season when everyone eats. Markets are not days of shouting, they are days of recognition. A pattern of knocks will invite those who have extra oil to meet those who have extra fibre. A third pattern calls the makers who can teach to sit between them. The lesson becomes part of the price. A new knot or a better way to frame a basket can travel home as part of the exchange. Knowledge is not hoarded because hoarding it would make the forest poorer, and a poorer forest would make everyone smaller. Time is also a tender. You can save it only by giving it away at the right moment. A neighbour who sits long with a sick elder pays a kind of tax that returns to them when their own season turns hard. A youth who takes 3 nights to learn how a bridge strains in wind is already wealthier than someone who carries 2 extra baskets. The wealth is portable. It is stored in hands that can rise when asked and do so with grace. Scarcity is faced as a circle. When salmon runs thin, the drums do not announce a hunt. They announce an audit. Trails that led to waste are closed. Berries that were gathered too young are left to teach. The circle asks for the history of small harms because small harms become large ones when weather does not forgive. Restitution is shared. Those who took too much return first. Those who kept balance carry the lesson, not the blame. No one is evicted from the circle. Everyone is returned to it. There are free riders. Every world has them. Here the problem is not solved by punishment that cuts. It is solved by work that binds. A name that fails to appear at repair gatherings begins to lose its place in stories. The silence is heavy. Eventually the person arrives and asks for a task. They are given the deep mud and the heavy stones. They come back tired and lighter. The circle speaks their name again. The cost is paid in sweat instead of shame. Long-distance exchange follows the spines of ridges and the voices of rivers. Caravans are not strings of animals burdened to the edge of breaking. They are relays of trust. A basket moves from one settlement to the next with a scent note that says where it should arrive. Along the way, a handful of its contents is shared by those who carry it. That handful is not theft. It is the fee that keeps the road alive. When the basket reaches its home, the empty space is a story of how many hands are still willing to walk together. There are gifts that are too heavy to repay. A life saved in winter. A fire carried through a week of rain. These are not debts that cling like burrs. They rise as obligations to the world that made the gift possible. The rescued family adopts a section of stream and keeps it clear for the rest of their days. They do not owe the rescuer, they owe the next traveller who will not slip. Gratitude becomes infrastructure. Marriage is not a merger of houses. It is a truce between territories that extends the length of a song. The ceremony is measured in labour. One side has learned a better weave for rainskins. The other has learned a better stack for winter fuel. The couple shares both in front of elders. The exchange is binding because it improves the commons. The dowry is not a chest. It is a promise to maintain a section of trail that sits exactly between the two families. It is difficult enough that no one can keep it alone. The oldest kind of insurance is many hands touching the same task. A roof lifted in a storm. A crossing rebuilt in thaw. The premium is presence at gatherings. The claim is made by showing the damage and speaking softly. There is an understanding that anyone can be broken by a season. There is another understanding that no one should be broken twice by pride. Help arrives without a speech. Later, the helped stand on the far bank and offer their backs when others cross. Children learn accounts by walking. With their elders, they touch places that hold value. A stretch of trail that drains well. A grove that drops sweet nuts late into frost. A bend in the creek where fish like to rest. Each site is a chapter in a book that teaches what must be returned for taking to remain clean. During festivals, they carry small baskets of light to those who kept the city breathing in storms. The children see the faces, they hear the names, they understand that thanks is not a word, it is a root. Contact with us rarely becomes trade in the way we imagine. Metal is bright, it tempts. But it is loud in the wrong places and it rusts into a kind of grief. Now and then a knife will enter the circle and be used until it breaks and then buried where rain cannot find it. The more lasting exchanges are quieter. We bring stories of far plains and stars and the weight of deserts. They bring evidence of a different arithmetic. How much shade a garden needs to feed two families. How many hours a bridge should sleep after a storm before it is safe to cross. Each side leaves changed if they are listening. There are seasons of plenty when laughter feels closer to the ground. There are seasons of thin where even the best prepared watch the sky more than they like. The economy holds both because it was grown for both. Surplus is never left idle. It is fermented into sweetness. It is taught into hands that can repeat it. It is turned into trails that shorten the distance between a problem and the person who can solve it. Hunger is never left unspoken. It is called by its name in the council, and then given a task so that it cannot sit still. We measure success strangely from where we stand. We ask how large, how fast, how high. Under the canopy the questions change. How steady? How generous? How quietly did your life make other lives easier? What if that is the true interest that a civilization earns? Not the number of goods moved across a season, but the number of fears that failed to take root. In that ledger, prosperity is not a hoard, but a calm that more and more people can sleep inside. What if justice were not a hammer, but a clearing where anger could finally put down its weight? Imagine a council called at first light. Not in a hall of stone, but beneath a tree, that has watched more winters than any living elder. Families arrive from different paths with steps that make no haste and make no threat. They greet the ground with open palms. No one speaks at once. A slow pattern of knocks measures who is present and who is missing. The tree keeps count and the silence keeps order. Two groups sit on opposite sides of the trunk. Between them lies the story as it currently hurts. A fishing weir placed a finger too far into the shared bend. A pathway trimmed too close to a den that should have remained asleep. A basket of berries taken without the scent mark that asks permission. The details change with each season. The wound is always the same. Something that belonged to many was treated as if it belonged to one. In this circle, accusation is not a weapon. It is a weight that the speaker carries toward the centre and sets down for everyone to see. The voice is kept low because volume is a kind of violence. Facts arrive like stones placed carefully so that they can hold a bridge. If a voice slips into heat, a hand returns to the trunk. Wood reminds breath to slow. The goal is not victory. The goal is a path that can carry all feet, again. Elders do not judge the way a mountain judges a valley. They listen until the story becomes simple enough to survive weather. They ask questions that begin with when and where rather than why. Why invites excuses, when and where invite memory. The forest is full of witnesses that do not lie. The level of a stream, the pattern of ash at a cook pit, the way a certain moss feels when it has been stepped on by hurried feet. Evidence is not a theatre, it is a walk. Punishment as we know it never learned this language. It demands spectacle. It wants fear to do the future work of conscience. Under the canopy, consequences wear a different face. The measure of a wrong is the shape of the harm it left behind. A blocked channel that turned water sour. A frightened herd that broke fences made of patient roots. A neighbour made small by shame. The repair must mirror the damage and must be heavier than pride but light enough for a life to carry. Restitution is labour that returns health to a place and dignity to a person. If you took fish, you lift stones at the fast water until the salmon can rest again. If you silenced a den, you sow quiet for a season by keeping children away from that glade and by teaching them the story of why. If you cut living wood where dead wood would have served you, repair the scar with care through 3 winters. The council sets the shape of the task. The wrongdoer sets their back to it. They are not banished. They are braided back in. There is also the work of voice. An apology is not a performance, it is a pattern. It must be spoken at the place where the harm occurred so that the ground can hear it. It must be witnessed by those who will be asked to trust the speaker again. It must end not with a plea for forgiveness, but with a promise to do a named task that benefits those who were made poorer. When the task is complete, the same witnesses return. They do not certify a soul, they certify a repaired piece of world. Some harms are old and shared, and no single pair of hands can carry them. Floods that worsened because trails were carved without thought. Herd routes pinched by too many small fences that felt harmless at the time. For these the council calls a season of restitution. The drums speak across valleys. Work parties form without command. Names are not recorded as credits and are not washed away as debts. The true account is written in the clarity of the stream when the job is done. What of anger that refuses to sit? There is a ceremony for heat. 2 sides meet with a mediator who has no stake except the health of the path between them. They speak while leaning their shoulders against the same trunk, so each feels the other through the wood. They trade a rhythm of knocks that reduces words to timing. When the rhythms match, they try words again. Anger is allowed to leave in steps rather than in shame. It is fed a task. It becomes tired. It sleeps. Borders in this world are not lines. They are gradients of responsibility. Where 2 territories overlap, the law is simple. You must leave a place better than you found it, and you must be able to show how. Proof can be a repaired step on a wet slope. Proof can be a pile of dead limbs stacked where beetles will make use of them. Proof can be a lesson taught to a child whose family does not share your scent. Trespass is not crossing. Trespass is taking without returning. There are wrongs that break more than a season, violence that leaves scars in minds, betrayal that makes drums sound like threats. The circle meets at night for these because night forces care. Faces are softer, and breath is louder, and stories come at a pace that does less harm to tell. Resolution is not a single event. It is a string of dawns in which those involved do small exact things that make the next dusk possible. The circle watches. It does not forget. It does not point. It does not leave. What if the highest law is not a list of forbidden acts but a habit of attention? To listen for changes in the stream, to feel the weight of a promise stretching thin long before it snaps, to speak early, to rearrange your work so that the commons gains back what your need has taken. Power in such a place is not the right to command. It is the skill of returning a complicated grief to simple chores that many hands can finish. We often ask whether justice can be blind. Under the canopy, the better question is whether justice can be patient. Can it wait long enough to understand the shape of harm? Can it design a repair that teaches rather than terrifies? Can it leave a wrongdoer heavier with understanding than with stigma? The answer is a slow word that feels like bark under a palm. Yes, if we remember that law is not a statue but a living thing. It must bend or it will break. It must root or it will fall. Dawn widens. The council stands. The tasks are named and accepted. A rhythm of thanks passes around the circle and into the tree. Before the people leave the clearing, they walk together to the first place where repair will begin. There is no cheer. There is a breath that many lungs share. Then bodies move in the simple music of work. The path will be safe again before the next rain. The lesson will travel farther than any voice can carry. And the law will continue its quiet labour of teaching a people how to remain together without becoming hard. What if worship was not a plea to distant heavens, but a conversation with the breath that moves through leaves? Begin at dusk when the first cool rises from the soil. The settlement dims until only the soft light of jars and fungi remains. Bodies gather in a clearing that was not cut from the forest. It was persuaded. The old tree at the centre is not an idol. It is a witness. Elders arrive without hurry. Children sit near the moss where sound is kind to small ears. Someone touches the trunk and the wood gives back a tone low and round like a bowl of water struck by a fingertip. The night answers, with the quiet of things that expect to be loved. Their pantheon is a handful of movements rather than a row of faces. The return of salmon is a saint made of muscle and silver. The orbit of rain is a mother who keeps time with a patient pulse along the roof frames. The patience of stone sits in the stream and teaches anyone who will touch its cold that endurance is a grammar. Even the fog has a moral. It says, be gentle with distance. Nothing you see is as near or as far as you think. Myth begins in work and returns to it. Creation stories speak of the first listener, not a conqueror, a figure who learned which trunks sing storms in advance and which only echo a moment after thunder. The first listener gathered the earliest counsels and taught a law with 2 sentences. Leave a place kinder than you found it. Teach this kindness to someone who does not have your scent. Every other instruction grows from this pair, the way branches grow from a patient spine. Rituals are not interruptions of life, they are its long breaths. At first snow a circle of hands guides smoke through a ring of wet leaves. The smell is a memory of summers that will return. At first thaw a little water is lifted from the creek and poured back. Gratitude wears no crown, it wears mud. When the salmon run swells, the people step into the stream in silence. They do not hunt on the first day. They count and sing a low scale that matches the beat of tails. They are not owed abundance, they are invited to share it wisely. Music is the limb through which belief moves. Frames of hollow wood carry the bass. Strings of sinew speak the mid-voice. Seed pods rattle the air the way rain rattles a shallow roof. Songs begin without signal. A single note kneels to the ground and the circle lets it stand. There are no virtuosos in the way we would recognize. There are keepers of keys who start the pitch that fits the weather. Some nights the music is almost nothing, a tone every few breaths. The silence that follows is not empty, it is full of listening. Dance is not performance, it is maintenance. Feet learn the exact places in a plaza of roots that need pressure to settle before storm season. Children are allowed to lead one figure of the dance each year, so they remember that beauty and repair are married. When a new bridge ripens, the first crossing is a procession. Those who laboured most do not walk first. They walk last, so their bodies can feel whether the structure accepts the praise without bending into vanity. If it does, they sing the bridge a small name and promise to use it when storms calm. If it does not, they return in daylight and add another season of care. Art happens everywhere a hand meets time. Moss is coaxed into shapes that keep dew for birds. Bark bears shallow reliefs that tell of floods and of the love that stayed awake to lift neighbours onto higher ground. Lichen carries a script that does not insist on forever. It accepts that meaning can be rewritten by rain if the lesson has already moved into bodies. Paints are ground from stone and clay and berry and ash and are carried on hair and fur and resin coats. Patterns change with season. The year is a gallery for anyone who knows how to see. Storytelling prefers darkness that does not bite. The council ring becomes a small theatre of breath and glow. Voices are low so that listeners can feel the tree carry words around the circle. Legends have no perfect heroes. They have figures who mismeasure a stream and repair it and are praised more for the return than for the failure. Tricksters exist. They are not punished for cleverness. They are asked to teach it to the young so that cleverness grows a conscience. Death is a ceremony that refuses to hurry. The body is given back to places that can use it fully. Sometimes this means a deep bed of leaves beneath a tree that has outlived many names. Sometimes this means a high platform until the last of the bone is clean and can be set into a wall of memory where fingers pass often and remember the weight of a life. Grief does not break the circle. It changes its pitch. For a season, the drums sound deeper. Laughter is not forbidden. It arrives slowly and sits closer to the ground. There are holy people, though none would claim the word. Weather listeners, pathkeepers, tenders of light. The weather listener wakes before others to taste wind at the mouth of the valley and to lean against trunks that predict with a soft tremor. The pathkeeper walks the same route every day until the stones know the shape of their feet, and their feet know the needs of each curve. The tender of light cultivates fungi that glow at a tone gentle enough for sleep and strong enough for safety. Training is years of doing the same small thing with attention so careful that it becomes a kind of prayer. Festivals belong to the calendar of mist and leaf. The night of many voices happens when the first insects begin to sing in layers. Families spread their beds beneath the open canopy and speak their year into the dark, not to be recorded, to be held and released. The day of returning water welcomes the first heavy rain with games that practice balance on wet wood. Children fall and laugh and learn. Laughter is not a disrespect to weather, it is a promise to become worthy of it. Contact with us enters this religion like an unexpected breeze. Myths grow a new limb. A tale of the thin fires appears. It teaches young ones that some strangers keep a different rhythm that can scorch the ground if placed too near the roots of patience. The lesson is not fear, it is calibration. When we bring shiny things, the circle thanks the travellers and buries what is too loud for the nights to bear. What remains is woven into practice. A pot that boils without smoke is a blessing only if it does not teach greed to stay up late and forget dawn. Belief here does not need obedience, it needs upkeep. If a prayer is to be spoken, it must be followed by a task that proves the mouth did not run ahead of the hands. If a vision arrives, it is greeted with questions about drainage and soil and the angle of winter light. Models are grown in small rings before they are attempted in large ones. Failure is not sin. It is a teacher whose fees are paid in labour. Stand at the edge of one of these gatherings and close your eyes. Hear the long note of a beam humming as night wind passes. Feel the slow drum that can cross a valley and return with its echo softened. Smell the salt that drifts upriver on the backs of fish. See with your skin the way the clearing keeps its cool even when voices gather. What if this is what holiness feels like when it does not need to defeat anything? A rightness that holds still long enough for gratitude to sit down beside it and begin to breathe at the same pace. What if we were the ones told at bedtime as a way to make young ears listen? In their world, our name is a shiver that passes through the brush when a spark lifts against the dark. We are the thin fires. We are the quick hands. We are the eyes that prefer open ground and distant horizons. When stories begin, the elders lower their voices not to frighten, but to tune the tale to the pitch of caution. The thin ones do not love the canopy. They step into the clearings and pull light down around them. They talk to each other with smoke and noise. They do not hear the old tree when it speaks. Remember this. Walk with company when fog settles and keep to the line of scent that means home. Imagine being a rumour that breathes. Children press their palms to a trunk at dusk and wait for the soft pattern that means the valley is calm. Somewhere beyond the reach of that signal, a small orange shakes against a black field, and the old ones watch it without moving. They know the smell of wood turned to ash. They know the taste of meat cooked too hot. They know that fire can be a helper and also a fickle ally that forgets who asked it to dance. Their stories about us always carry that double thought. Be curious. Be careful. The Thin Ones taught the forest a new brightness. The Thin Ones also taught it how to fear. The myths are specific. A pair of walkers followed a stream on a cold morning and found prints near a sandbar. The marks were almost delicate. 5 narrow toes. A heel that looked like it wished it were wearing a second skin. The walkers held their breath and listened. They heard the foreign stutter of metal against rock. They were wise enough to step back into shadow and leave no reply. That night the elders told the children the shape of the prints and the scent that trails behind them. They did not say, "Do not look." They said, "Do not surprise." The Thin Ones do not like surprises. There are artifacts that turn up at the edges of lives. A coil of dull wire in a drift of leaves. A tin that was once bright and now wears a green sadness. A shard of glass that still holds a perfect sky. These are not trophies to display. They are questions, to walk around until the answers grow gentle. Does this metal sing when wind runs through it? Does this glass bend light in a way that helps seedlings find their reach? If the answer is no, the thing is buried where it will trouble no root. If the answer is yes, the thing is folded into use with a care that will not praise it too loudly. No tool that makes pride grow faster than patience is allowed near the heart of a settlement. We appear as flickers at the edges of their vision, a movement on a ridge where no branch swayed, a line of soot on a stone that does not belong to any cooking ring they know, a smell of oil and smoke that travels wrong. Hunters learn to read these signs the way they read the mood of a stream, not because they plan to chase us, because they plan to avoid the kind of meeting that asks fear to decide what happens next. The advice is simple and repeated often. If you see a thin fire, count to 30 breaths. If you still want to go forward after 30 breaths, take 30 more. There are also tales of kindness. A winter ran long, and the fish did not return in time to keep the old from tightening their belts. A small blaze appeared near an outer trail, and a pair of Thin Ones left food wrapped in leaf and vanished. The food tasted of smoke and fat and something sweet none could name. The elders debated until dawn whether to accept the gift. In the end, they shared it while standing in a circle so that gratitude would not lean too far in one direction. The story is told now with a lesson that sits next to the warning. The Thin Ones are not only hunger, they are also hands. Do not mistake one for the other, but do not forget either. Children ask the questions that adults carry quietly. What do their homes look like? Do they have elders? Do they have nights of quiet? The answers are measured and honest where honesty is possible. Their homes are lines of shelter that move when the season asks them to. Their elders are those who can make a path appear where grass used to push them back. Their nights are not quiet in the way ours are. Their nights sound like ideas being made out of pieces that do not belong to the place where they were found. Such nights are powerful. Such nights are dangerous. Both things can be true. On rare mornings, a meeting happens because the world insists. Fog clears too quickly. Two groups find each other on a narrow spit of gravel between water and cliff. There is not enough space to pretend the other is a rumour. What follows is a protocol older than words. Bodies turn side on to appear smaller, eyes lower and then lift to show they are still clear. Palms open. No one rushes. When sound arrives, it is the soft strike on wood that means peace if you give me peace. Sometimes our reply is the simple lowering of a flame so the smoke thins and the scent of fear can weaken. Then distance returns and both parties walk away with hearts that beat a little too fast, and stories that will be told carefully for many. Seasons, we end up in their lore as a special category. Not prey, not enemy, not neighbour, a weather. Something you plan around and respect and try not to anger. There are rules for weather. Do not build where the river will need to breathe when it grows tall. Do not light a blaze where the wind will be tempted to carry it into the bones of the city. Do not teach children that the Thin Ones are monsters. Monsters are an excuse to stop thinking. Teach children that the Thin Ones are a pattern. Patterns can be learned. Patterns can be misread. Both lessons save lives. Our tools leave long shadows in their thinking. A pot that boils without smoke solves a problem, but also erases a signal that has kept the night honest. A cord that never rots removes the task that taught hands how to see when a cord was ready to fail. They have a word for gifts that arrive with teeth. They handle them with gloves made of caution. When we offer something bright, they ask the same questions they ask the weather listeners. What does it do to the stream? What does it do to the path? What does it do to the pace of sleep? In their smallest stories, we are sometimes funny. A thin one tries to move through brush and makes a music of curses as thorns find cloth. A thin one forgets how steep a slope becomes when it rains and slides with a dignity that vanishes halfway down. Children laugh. Laughter is allowed. Later, someone reminds them to thank the slope for teaching on a day when the lesson was not too expensive. Humour does not erase respect. It keeps fear from turning into contempt. There are darker versions. A camp left behind bones that were not given back with care. A fire walked into the moss and bit a young grove until it cried sap. Those nights the drums speak a stern rhythm that gathers hands for repair and sends warnings along the ridges. The story ends not with rage but with vows that reach into many tomorrows. This bend of water will be watched through 3 summers. This stretch of path will be widened in 2 places so that flight is easier if flight is needed again. The thin ones are folded into the plan the way weather is folded in. You cannot order a storm to stop. You can build the kind of life that survives it. If you could stand among them as an honest guest and ask what we are, you might hear a tender answer. You're a reminder that the world holds more than one rhythm. You rush, we wait, you shine, we soften. Sometimes your rush is a rescue, sometimes your shine is a burn. We will not let the tale become simple. We cannot afford simple. We have children who will walk these trails after us, and they deserve a story that keeps their feet alive. At the end of a day, when no smoke is seen, and only the old familiar sounds move through trunks, there is a custom. A small braid of sweet grass is lifted to the wind, and its scent is carried toward the open places. It is not a prayer. It is a message with no demand in it. May your fires be kind tonight. May your hunger be clever without cruelty. May your steps fall where the ground is willing. Somewhere beyond the ridge a spark lifts and dims and lifts again. The forest breathes. The rumour rests. The world holds both ways of being for one more night. What if the first true meeting was not chosen by either side, but arranged by weather and chance morning breaks, slow and grey? Fog lays its careful hands along the creek and holds on. A small figure moves where the stones are flat. A child by our measure, alone and too quiet for comfort. The forest noticed an hour ago. Birds left space between calls. Water stretched its voice thin as if to make room for another sound. A family of towering shapes waits beyond sight where the cedar roots rise like ribs. They speak in small knocks that do not travel far. Not alarm, not welcome. Wait. The child kneels to tie a strip of cloth that has come loose. Fingers are quick. The knot is poor. The child stands and does not see the high trail where 2 watchers shift their weight from foot to foot without rustling a leaf. The watchers smell salt and smoke. They smell fear that is trying not to be fear. They smell hunger that is pretending to be patience. One leans a shoulder against the trunk and lets the wood carry a single tone. It is the soft note that means I am here and I do not reach. The child hears nothing at first. Then the body hears before the ear. A tiny quiver along the ribs like a bow pulled and released from a great distance. The child looks up and sees a shape that no story prepared them for in a way that can be described later. Height is one truth. Broadness another. The biggest truth is the stillness. The figure is as motionless as a stubborn tree, and yet every part of the forest seems to be paying attention to the place where it stands. The child's hands rise without thinking. Palms open because the body remembers old animal laws that live under all language. There is a piece of fruit in a small bag. It is not quite ripe, but it is round and kind. The child takes it out and holds it with 2 hands as if offering a small son to an old knight. The figure does not move. The figure does not reach. It presses its palm against the trunk and gives the tree a pattern. 3 soft notes spaced the way a mother would place her breath between words ending a worry. The echo returns from farther back and matches the timing. The settlement has heard and is holding its distance. Time widens. Fog loosens on the ground and gathers instead in the throat. The child takes one careful step forward and then stops where the stones darken with slick. A slip would be a story that ends in pain. The figure steps forward once in answer, and the bank does not complain. Weight is placed the way a memory is placed, with respect. The distance between them is the length of 2 outstretched arms, and the weight of 2 different civilizations that do not want to bruise each other. A second figure arrives without arriving. You notice only that the air feels housed as if another wall has risen without sound. It is smaller than the first, but still taller than any door the child has ever passed through. It carries a pouch woven from bark and resin. From the pouch, it takes a piece of dried fish. It sets the food on a flat rock between them. Not an offering, a statement. This is a safe border shaped like a meal. No one steps across it unless both agree. The child lowers the fruit onto the same stone. For a moment, the two pieces rest together. See an orchard, share a plate, and make a smell like a memory that belongs to neither side and both. The tall one touches the trunk again. One note, then another. A slow third. It is the pattern that means I will take from left and leave from right. The smaller nods with shoulders rather than head. The child, who has never learned this language, understands the intention because kindness has its own grammar in every species that survives long enough to raise young. They move. The tall one takes the fruit from the left edge of the rock with fingers that eclipse the small sun in a single eclipse, and then places the dried fish on the right. The child mirrors without being asked. Sweetness trades for salt. Hunger meets skill. The fog listens. Now the choice arrives that needs more than courtesy. The child is too far from any camp that knows their name. The creek bends in a way that hides a steep drop only a short walk ahead. This is knowledge that could be spoken easily in words if words were shared. It cannot be. It must be acted. The smaller figure steps back and pats the ground beside a root that offers a natural seat. It sits and indicates the same spot with an open palm. The child hesitates, then sits, ground to ground. Breath settles. The tall one begins a slow drum speech into the trunk. Not to send a message across distance, to wrap a meaning around the clearing. 3 notes rising in a calm ladder, a pause the length of a long-held breath. 3 notes again. It is a pattern used to soothe children who fear thunder. It is also a pattern used to tell hunters to wait where they are until fog lifts. 2 meanings in one rhythm. The child does not hear the old nights that gave the rhythm its first job. The child feels the stopping of fear anyway. From the path above the creek, 2 more figures appear. They carry coils of woven cord and a bundle of thin branches already bending toward arches. They move like a team that has repaired many things. They do not look at the child until the work is chosen. Their eyes measure slope and water and the place where the path fails. A quick shelter rises the way a thought takes shape when it has been thought before. Branches lean together, cord tightens. Moss laid over the frame becomes a roof that will keep mist from soaking clothes. The shelter faces away from the drop. The drop is now only a rumour. There will be debate later in the council. What promise was made by accepting a seat? What precedent is created by raising a roof for a stranger with thin fires in their future? For now, the ethic is simpler than any law is brave enough to be. A small person is unsafe. A safe place must exist. If that place does not exist, it must be built. If building it draws a line that will be hard to redraw later, that's a problem for mourning. They share water. The child drinks and gives the vessel back with both hands. The vessel is made of bark that has learned the habit of holding. The tall one drinks second to show that trust runs in both directions. A small exchange of tools happens without anyone naming it as such. A piece of cloth is offered in return for the kindness. It is bright and soft and will be useless as a roof and perfect as a banner to mark a lesson. The smaller figure accepts it and ties it to a branch at the shelter's entrance. The wind tries a few pulls, the knot holds. When the fog finally thins, the creek shows its teeth downstream. The child sees the white water and understands the shape of the danger that had been waiting. Fear comes late and honest. The child looks up and finds 2 faces waiting without demand. A hand as big as a small shield lifts and points along the safe path. The direction is up and away and into open ground. The child nods. A word tries to be born and fails because no word is shared. The child presses a hand to the trunk instead. The wood sends the gesture around the clearing. All 3 bodies feel it at once. Departure is quiet because gratitude does not need to be loud to last. The child walks the indicated route and does not look back until distance has gentled the size of the figures. When they do turn, the shelter is no longer visible. Only a strip of bright cloth moves where wind tests the knot. The clearing is part of the forest again. A story starts growing in 2 languages that do not touch, and still find a way to agree on the important parts. Later, beneath the old tree, the council speaks the event into a shape that can carry through seasons. No treaty is signed. No trumpets confirm a triumph. A different kind of line is drawn. If a small one is in danger, a shelter is debt we are glad to owe. If a meeting can be arranged without fear, then let fear be given a task so that it has no time to poison the next meeting. If a gift is left and it burns too bright, bury it where it cannot tell the night to forget how to be night. If a gift is left and it tastes like a better way to be careful, teach it carefully. And somewhere on a plain beyond the last trees, a child tries to explain to voices that want to turn the day into a boast. There was a giant. It did not roar, it waited. It made the world more safe than it had been. The child cannot say how tall. The child can only say how kind. The story is laughed at by some and saved by others. It will change in the telling because stories always do. But at its heart, something true will remain. There was an exchange between two different ways of being alive. No one won, no one lost. The creek kept its course and a life kept walking. What if the climate decided to speak in a harder voice, and every valley had to learn a new grammar overnight? Begin with rain that forgets how to be gentle. Storms arrive earlier and stay later. The river grows moods you have never seen. One week it runs like muscle. The next week it threads itself into many thin nerves and hides in gravel. Salmon learn new routes, and the old songs no longer match the water. Under the canopy, power does not answer with walls. It answers with listening. Whether listeners rise before dawn and lean their weight into trunks that once hummed a certain warning and now hum another. They do not ask who to blame, they ask where to move. A map unfolds that was not made by hands but by seasons. Migration paths bend toward colder shade. Foraging grounds slide up slope by the height of a tall body each decade. The council traces these shifts with cords of fibre on the floor of the hall. Every cord is a road the body can understand. This ridge will hold fog longer. That saddle will dry first after rain. The plan that emerges is not a line. It is a weave. When the weave is strong enough, whole families walk it without losing themselves. Politics becomes the shape of overlapping needs. A river clan meets a high forest clan at a mouth where salt pushes up river on the back of the moon. The fish are fewer. The berries ripen in new rooms of the forest. Tension stands waiting like a tree that was cut poorly and leans toward a path. The agreement they make is not a treaty that imagines the future will sit still. It is a series of corridors that promise quiet at certain times of year. Boats will not slap water when the first silver bodies return. Trails will be trimmed wide when herds need to pass without panic. Each promise has a test written into it. If the stream runs clear after storm, the promise is being kept. If it clouds, the promise is fraying and hands must return before words do. Fire changes too. Some summers it walks on the ground like an old teacher who has decided to visit more often. Some summers it climbs and becomes a sky event. The settlements turn their attention to edges, not fences, gradients, rings of vegetation that choose to burn softly and early, moist gardens that drink sparks until rain can find them, roofs that shed embers into channels that end in stone bowls. The loudest lesson is restraint. Clear the understory too hard and the wind will race. Clear it too little and the dark will carry a heat that wakes badly. Precision is a kind of prayer, and it is spoken with knives and rakes and patience. Drought brings a different arithmetic. Water is no longer the background of every plan. It becomes the subject. Cistern ponds are linked in chains so that a failure in one is softened by the kindness of two others. Storage is measured in days of sleep saved for elders, and in mornings when children do not wake with the taste of dust. The economy, that grew on reputation, adapts without drama. Those who hold uphill water owe shade to those below. Those who harvest fog on ridges owe dew to gardens that now sit where cloud once did. Payment moves at night as mist caught in long nets that glimmer like the skins of fish. Credit is the relief in a leaf that would have curled. Sea level rises do not knock, they seep. Tidal lines revise themselves on quiet mornings when no one expects change. Coastal settlements lift their floors by the height of a hand each season, rather than by the height of a fear all at once. The move inland is not abandonment, it is a braid. One home remains where the sea still kisses kindly. Another grows where the soil has not yet learned salt. People do not split, they lengthen. The old places are visited at dawn with offerings of repair for dunes and grasses and for birds that have lost their first choices. Grief is allowed. It is kept from becoming a project. Geopolitics has a new meaning when borders are weather. Under the canopy, they do not draw lines that say mine and yours. They draw tasks that say ours. A valley and a ridge sign their names with labour. One side will maintain the steps that keep a slope from walking during rain. The other will keep the side channels open, so flood has rooms to visit that are not houses. The signature is the work completed before the first big storm. When a season ends clean, both names are praised. When it ends dirty, both names return. Blame is a luxury that thin years cannot afford. Contact with us scales up as climate shifts. We arrive with measurements that extend far beyond the next hill, and with stories of fires that learn to run like armies. Sometimes our help is true. A pot that cleans water without fuel. A cloth that tells the hand how wet the air is in numbers that do not lie. Sometimes our help is too fast. We are eager to solve. The canopy is eager to endure. The exchange improves when both sides agree on tempo. We share data that translates into their instruments. They share indicators that our models forgot. The taste of resin when drought crosses a certain threshold. The way vole paths thicken a month before a landslide. Together a map becomes more than a picture. It becomes a schedule of care. There are refugees in every climate story. Herds become homeless first, then birds, then the small steady lives that hold a forest together in ways that do not make loud news. Finally, people move. A settlement that never expected a neighbour finds one at the edge of its shade. Under the canopy, hospitality is a law of physics. A new group arrives. They are given water. They are given a task that helps them belong. The hardest politics is naming how much a place can carry without snapping. Carrying capacity is not a number to be argued into kindness. It is a breath that can be felt. If the streams do not recover between storms, the circle draws a boundary that is honest. The newcomers are guided to a ridge where fog remembers to land. Materials and teachers go with them. A daughter settlement is not exile, it is a branch. Law changes shape as climate does. The old council under the ancient tree remains the heart, but its ears grow longer. Patrols become less about watching for enemies and more about listening for failing infrastructure. A drum code means a root bridge is complaining in wind. A different code means a cistern garden needs new plants that can drink brackish water without turning bitter. Judgments in disputes invoke climate first. If two claims are equal, the one that makes the valley more resilient wins. Precedent is not static, it is seasonal. Rulings expire like berries. They are renewed only if the test of weather is passed. Children are taught to read futures that adults will not live to see. They walk routes that did not exist in the childhood of their parents, and plant trees that will shelter their grandchildren and strangers. Their games practice balance on wet logs and patience while fog speaks. They learn to love places that move. They refuse the sadness that says a shifting world cannot be home. They build homes that know how to shift. What if strength is not the grip that refuses to release, but the hand that learns how to carry without tearing? Under a harder sky, the Sasquatch civilization remains itself by changing. It carries dignity the way a bridge carries a family. With give, with attention, with the exact amount of song needed to keep fear from talking too loudly. The future is not a wall they will hit. It is a trail they will revise and revise again until the river and the wind and the needs of many can share it without bruising. At night, the council sits with the ledger of weather open in their breaths. Stars blur behind a high haze that did not belong to the old years. Drums speak slowly to other valleys. A single vow travels farther than any tool. Leave each place kinder than you found it. Teach this kindness to someone who does not share your scent. Climate tries to make the vow smaller. The circle answers by making the work larger. And tomorrow when the fog lifts, they will move stones and open channels and grow roofs that bend. The world will change again. They will meet it without panic and without pride. They will meet it as a people who know that survival is a form of art. What if the future was not a victory for one language over another, but a long apprenticeship in listening? Imagine a valley where two kinds of footprints overlap and do not cancel each other. Bridges of living root carry bodies that move with great weight and bodies that move with quick steps. On a quiet morning, a child from the plains and a child from the canopy walk the same path in opposite directions and stop in the wide place where the old council tree can hear both of their hearts. The world has been trying to teach this lesson for a long time. It says do not choose between speed and patience. Learn the measure that lets them keep time together. The first work is translation, and it does not begin with dictionaries. It begins with shared chores that speak for themselves. A team from our side brings a small pot that can make water safe without smoke. It is set beside a cistern pond that glows with the work of roots that drink impurities. The two methods do not argue, they ask each other questions. The pot answers when the river turns angry after storms. The pond answers all the rest of the year. Together they turn danger into a schedule instead of a surprise. The lesson is simple enough for children. Use the fire when you must. Use the forest when you can. There are corridors that must be kept quiet if both peoples are to eat and sleep without fear. In the council ring, a map is formed from cords and stones and scent marks. It looks less like a border and more like a piece of music. Certain valleys go silent in the early weeks of the salmon run. Certain ridges welcome low-noise travel when herds need to pass. In return, open ground near the plains is kept clear for signals that ride smoke and light. A law grows that says kindness must be audible to both sides. A knock that means safe, a lamp that means wait. Neither replaces the other. Both are taught to every child until the gestures live in their hands. We bring letters and numbers that travel without bodies. They bring a grammar of place that anchors meaning where weather can test it. A school appears with two rooms that share a wall. In one room, a teacher writes as slowly as dawn, and names of things line up in neat rows. In the other room, a guide takes learners to a bend in the creek and shows how truth is the way water behaves when stones are moved to the right places. Students drift between rooms during the same lesson. They learn that a good idea must survive chalk and rain. Architecture becomes the marriage of patience and reach. A shelter is grown from trunks that were persuaded when they were young and joined by frames that we can raise in a week when weather threatens. Roofs open to drink cool and close when sparks fly. Floors borrow the habit of moss so they stay kind to knees and strong under weight. Windows become agreements rather than holes. A pane of clear sand slides behind a screen of vines. One keeps heat, one keeps balance. The house is allowed to choose which face it shows to the day. Energy finds a middle road. Water wheels in side channels turn without troubling fish. Fibers twist to store slow power. Above them, a line of quiet panels rests on frames that never touch living wood. They gather light in the hours when fog relents and give it back when fungi decide to sleep. No one hunts absolute solutions. The aim is a set of methods that cover for one another by temperament, loud when needed, soft when possible, enough to keep rooms gentle and paths honest. Law changes shape because the circle has grown. The ancient tree remains a witness. Beside it stands a post of carved stone set by our hands. Neither judges the other. Both hold different kinds of memory. Disputes that begin in one language are told again in the other, while everyone waits for the version that hurts least and explains most. Restitution is measured in repaired places and also in hours of service that can be counted by those who need numbers to trust. A wrong that silenced a den is repaid with quiet work over seasons. A wrong that emptied a storehouse is repaid with days of labour and a record that forgives when the task is done. Mercy is not a sentiment. It is a ledger that closes when the world is healthy again. Trade deepens without turning life into a market that never sleeps. We bring cloth that can resist rot, and they teach knots that release before a branch breaks. We bring small tools that hold an edge, and they show where to bury the broken metal so it will not teach greed to return to a place that needs rest. We carry seeds that like the open, and they carry spores that dance well under shade. The highest luxury becomes the ability to choose a slower method when it is kinder to the stream. Wealth is a trail that feels safe under many kinds of feet. Rituals learn new steps. During the night of many voices, the ring widens. Our songs that travel on breath meet their tones that travel through wood. A keeper of keys from the canopy sets the pitch, and a singer from the plains carries it forward. The music finds a middle where both bodies can breathe. On the day of returning water, races on wet wood are still held, and now a track of dry stone is added so that no one is left out by balance alone. Children discover that joy is a language that needs no translation. Adults discover that joy is also a treaty. There are places of research that look different from any lab we're used to. A long porch hangs under a slope and faces a stream that has been speaking for centuries. On the porch, instruments made of glass rest beside frames of hollow wood. Weather listeners press their shoulders to posts to taste the wind. Graphs are etched slowly on bark that will last a season and no more. Sensors send their measures to distant mines. The two practices test each other with the calm cruelty of good friends. A new sign is added to the shared code. When a pattern grows in both systems, it is very likely real. Some meetings are not solved by tools or by song. They are solved by time and a revised map of pride. A thin fire camp is set too near a migration corridor out of ignorance rather than malice. Drums carry the quiet command that means wait. A messenger arrives with a pot of water and a story about a herd that will not see the camp until it is too late. Our team lifts tents and stoves and steps back. No one applauds. The herd passes. The grass remembers how to bend without breaking. The camp moves to a shelf of rock that holds wind and view and harms nothing except the patience of those who had to carry heavy things a little farther. That is the kind of cost that grows civilization instead of shrinking it. Education begins to ask a different question. Not what job will you do, what kind of care will you become good at? A young person can choose to be a listener of weather, or a healer of streams, or a keeper of light, or a builder of shelters that grow. They can also choose to be a bridge between practices, to spend a year with numbers and another with bark, to learn the way sound travels through trunks and the way a signal rides a wire. No one is forced to carry both. Enough choose the braid that the circle is never without translators. Stories adapt to hold these new shapes without becoming simple. The myth of the first listener acquires a companion. The tale of the patient maker who learned to borrow speed without breaking stillness. In our camp, the old script about monsters in the tree line learns a gentler ending. The giant waits and lets a child pass safely. The lesson is that fear can become respect when it is taught to breathe. Children on both sides sleep better. Elders on both sides worry less and work more. That is how you can tell a story has done its job. Not all days are graceful. Some are loud with misunderstanding. A tool is praised too highly and pride grows where it should not. A corridor is ignored and a herd flinches and scatters. The council meets again and again. Words are spoken that feel like stones and then are softened by tasks. Hands repair what mouths disturbed. The rhythm continues: try, fail, repair, teach. This is not weakness. This is a culture that has decided to survive together. Stand in the clearing at dusk, air cools. The river speaks with a steady throat. On one side, a small lamp is raised and hooded and raised again to say the path is safe. On the other side, a slow pattern of knocks answers from the trunk to say the night is listening. Between them, children chase the last of the light and fall laughing on a floor that remembers many feet. Overhead, a roof of living leaves shifts to show one star and then another. The world you are looking at is not a compromise that made both sides smaller. It is a partnership that taught both sides to grow in directions they could not have found alone. What if progress is the art of choosing the right pace together? What if the future is not a finish line but a path that changes shape while staying true to a vow? Leave each place kinder than you found it. Teach this kindness to someone who does not share your scent. The vow sounds simple when it sits in a mouth. It becomes profound when it passes through many hands. And it becomes a civilization when two very different ways of being alive decide to keep it at the same time. What if the measure of a life was not what it conquered, but what it learned to hear? Night has come back to the canopy and to the plains beyond. The last light is a thin ribbon on the river, and then even that is gone. The forest breathes in. The forest breathes out. Somewhere far off, a single note travels through wood the way a wish travels, through a quiet mind. It is not a summons, it is not a warning. It is a reminder that many hearts are learning to keep time together. Think of everything we imagine tonight. Cities that grow the way leaves do. Laws that repair instead of break. Wealth that follows behind like a cared-for path. Power that sits down in a clearing and waits for anger to put down its weight. A language that begins in the bones and moves outward until a whole valley can understand it at once. None of this requires magic. It requires a different center of gravity. Less noise, more attention, less hurry, more days given to the patient instruments of place. Under this sky, the old questions sound new. What is progress if it does not let children sleep without fear? What is genius if it does not make the stream clearer by dawn? What is strength if it cannot carry a stranger without tearing? We have our tools and our rush and our reach. They have their patience and their listening and their slow math of seasons. The future that holds both is not an argument won. It is an apprenticeship shared. Picture a bridge of living roots in the dark. No footsteps on it now, only dew learning where to rest. That bridge was begun by hands that never crossed it, and it will be repaired by hands that do not yet have names. A civilization is that bridge scaled to the size of a world. Work started before we were ready. Care extended beyond our own bodies. Promises made to places that will outlive our stories. If Bigfoot ruled the earth, perhaps this was always the lesson. Build so that gratitude can find a place to sit long after your voice is gone. We remain what we are. Quick minds, bright fires, restless eyes. They remain what they are. Broad patience, quiet speech, paths worn into kindness. The wonder is not in choosing one and refusing the other. The wonder is in the way both can fit. On the far side of the ridge, a thin lamp rises and lowers to say the path is open. In the trees, a soft pattern returns to say, the night is listening. Between them, a small wind carries the smell of water that will reach both camps by morning. So we end where all good stories end. Not with a wall, but with a door that opens slowly. If the world asked one thing of us tonight, it was this. Match your pace to the places that hold you. Let your inventions learn the pitch of rest. Let your plans remember the curve of a river before they are trusted. Teach your children the vow that survives weather. Leave each place kinder than you found it. Teach this kindness to someone who does not share your scent. Listen once more. The drums are very far away now, and so is the bright hiss of our own rooms. What remains is the ordinary miracle of breath. In, out, in, out. If Bigfoot ruled the world, perhaps that miracle would be the first law and the last lesson. Not a throne, not a banner, only the patience to hear what was always there. Only the courage to live as if the quiet were telling the truth.